frankly, exhausted of Bret.
More than
People
70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam Vice
You and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What's going on, everybody? Thank you all for joining me today. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit the like button, because that's the most important thing you can do for me on this channel. What it does, that helps make sure that those who are subscribed to the channel will indeed get their notifications, and it also helps to push this video through the YouTube algorithm as well. Secondly, if you're new to the channel, or maybe you've been ghost watching this channel for quite some time now, please do me a favor and yourself a favor by hitting the subscribe button as well as the bell notification next to the subscribe button, so you can be notified whenever I release a new video. And lastly, please make sure you share this video out on your social media platforms to your family and friends to inform them on this news and information. And yes, that does help to give me a slight boost in the YouTube algorithm as well. And with the introduction out of the way, let's get into today's news. And we have to talk about Kamala Harris's disastrous Fox News interview, where coming towards the end of the interview, she just completely exploded, lost it, elevated her voice significantly. She wasn't screaming, but she was definitely upset, to say the very least. She gets very uncomfortable when she's just not allowed to spew her talking points about how she grew up in the middle class over and over and over again. And I want to give the interviewer Bret that much credit, or I want to give him credit for setting the tone early in this interview within the first 2 minutes, where when he would ask Kamala Harris a question, he can sense that she was headed straight into her usual script that she normally goes into, and he would immediately interject, not allowing that to happen. He did it about twice in a 2-minute period, and like I said, that was very necessary to set the tone, because it's unfair to him and it's unfair to the viewers to have our time wasted, where you're going to give these interviews and all you're going to do is tell us about how you grew up in the middle class and your mom saved up money so that she could buy her first home. We know that already, and we don't want to hear that anymore. Tell us something new. Tell us something that is genuinely from you. And the more and more she got into her genuine self, the more and more she got agitated and upset, because that's not what she wants to do. Now, what I want to highlight first is a moment that I thought was very interesting and very important very early on. I believe this was, one of the first questions. Actually, they spent about 10 minutes on the migrant crisis alone within this 26-minute interview. But let's listen to this here, because I want to harp, or I should say highlight, on what was stated at the end of this clip. So let's jump into this right now.
When you came into office, your administration immediately reversed a number of Trump border policies. Most significantly, the policy that required illegal immigrants to be detained through deportation, either in the U.S. or in Mexico. And you switched that policy. They were released from custody awaiting trial. So instead, included in those were a large number of single men, adult men, who went on to commit heinous crimes. So, looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
At the beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress, before we worked on infrastructure, before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the Chips and Science Act, before the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the... Yes, ma'am.
May I finish responding, please?
Now, let's discuss that very quickly. And no, you may not finish responding, because, understand, when they're talking about Democrats, Kamala Harris, are talking about the immigration system was broken, they're talking about it's broken from the standpoint of illegal immigrants won't get mass amnesty. There's not going to be a mass amnesty citizenship for all bill. And that's what they wanted to put in place, if you let her tell it, and by her words, within hours of being sworn into the Oval Office. Let's really highlight this for a moment. And this right here is the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021. Biden and Harris gets in office. They put a moratorium on all deportations, effectively stopping all deportations of illegal immigrants. They repeal and throw in the trash Donald Trump's Remain in Mexico and put in place their policy catch and release, which is essentially the complete opposite of Remain in Mexico, which is Remain in the United States, which then created now the migrant crisis, with those three key pieces of legislation either being added or removed. Now, after this, they immediately move to implement this law and move it through Congress. The U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021. The U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021 was a legislative bill that was proposed by President Joe Biden on his first day in office. It was formally introduced in the House by Representative Linda Sanchez. It died with the ending of the 117th Congress. The bill would have made sweeping changes across the border to the United States immigration, visa, and border control system, including reversal of congressional probation of many of the immigration-related executive actions of former President Donald Trump, providing a path to legal residence and eventual citizenship for as many as 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States, as well as essential workers and non-immigration status, essential workers on non-immigration status and agricultural laborers, recreating the V visa program to allow families to await immigrant visa approval together in the U.S., ending country-specific visa annual maximums, granting immediate relative status to spouses and children of green card holders, and other changes. By and large, citizenship for all. They literally created the migrant crisis and at the same time attempted to implement citizenship for all. This was part of the plan from the very beginning, and this is literally what they all did on day one. Don't ever let anyone fool you into thinking or believing that the migrant crisis is Donald Trump's fault, even though he wasn't in office, which is completely ridiculous and stupid. It's all Harris and Biden's fault because they are the ones who created it. Now, I want to get into this portion next that I found very interesting. Kamala Harris continued to highlight how she's just going to follow the law. And I found that interesting because you're the vice president who's now running to be president. What do you mean I'm just going to follow the law when she's being asked a series of questions? Let's get into that right now, and then we'll elaborate on that more.
There's a lot of people that look back at what you said in 2019 when you first ran for president. And there have been changes, and you've talked about some of them. When it comes to immigration, you supported allowing immigrants in the country illegally to apply for driver's license, to qualify for free tuition at universities, to be enrolled in free health care. Do you still support those things?
Listen, that was 5 years ago, and I'm very clear that I will follow the law. I have made that statement over and over again, and as Vice President of the United States, that's exactly what I've done, not to mention before.
This is a time when voters, especially here in Pennsylvania, are inundated with commercials and ads. They just want it to stop because it's every commercial. But many of them add noise, but a few of them seem to break through. This particular one from the Trump campaign has gotten a lot of attention.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
Are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system. And I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of like throwing stones when you're living in a glass house.
The Trump aides say that he never advocated for that prison policy and no gender transition surgeries
you know what? You got to
happened
take
during
responsible for what
his
happened in your
presidency.
administration.
Yeah, no surgeries happened in his presidency.
It's in black and white.
Would you still advocate for using taxpayer dollars for gender reassignment surgeries?
I will follow the law, just as I think Donald Trump would say he did.
You would have a say as president.
I will follow the law. First off, I found it very comical that she would say, well, and very smug, well, you have to take responsibility for what happened while you were president. Look who's talking. Look who's not taking responsibility for anything that happened while they were in the White House, which is Harris and Biden. But secondly, as Bret stated, she keeps saying, I'm just going to follow the law. And he goes, well, as president, you would have a say in that. You're being asked these questions because we want to know whether or not you're going to further strengthen these laws, whether or not you're going to remove these laws off the books. That's the purpose of asking you whether or not you support them. I'm not asking you whether or not you still hold certain truths to be true for you to tell me, well, I'm just going to follow the law. Do you support X, Y, and Z bill? Do you support this action? Well, I'm just going to follow the law. Well, if you as vice president, who then wants to be president, is just going to follow the law, then who's actually running the country? Who's running the country? Because as the president of the United States, you're the one who creates the law or can remove the laws, as you did concerning Donald Trump border control bills. You can create laws and or repeal and throw away laws, particularly with the help and assistance of Congress, right? Because the overwhelming majority of bills and laws cannot just be done by executive order, as we all know. The majority of bills and laws, when they pass or get repealed, it has to go through Congress. But as the president and vice president of the United States, you clearly have a say-so, as well as veto power. So I find it very odd, once again, that she keeps defaulting to, I'm just going to follow the law. If you're just going to follow the law like an NPC, then once again, who is really in control? And when you become president, who will be in control, truly in control, if you get elected in? I think that that's something that people need to pay attention to. When you have this Manchurian candidate within Kamala Harris, who keeps looking into the camera like a machine saying, I will follow the law. I will just follow the law. Find that very odd and find that very interesting. Now, what I want to do here in closing is that I want to transition over to when she really blew up. There was a point here in this conversation when she really blew up, coming towards the end of the interview. And once again, you can expect this to happen when you can't get your typical script off the ground that you would like to normally recite. Like I stated, she wasn't able, I think even one time in this interview, to say that she grew up in the middle class. She wasn't able to get it off. And when she's not able to get it off, her true self comes out. The anger comes out. The woman who had a revolving door of staff members while she was vice president, of people who would constantly quit and leave her staff to go do God knows what else, because anything is better than working for Kamala Harris. Let's get into this clip right here in closing.
Talks about an enemy within.
Let me rewind it back just a little bit.
He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
We asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
Donald Trump has never said anything about turning the U.S. Army on the American people for having a difference of political opinion. He's never said anything like that. She's getting into bloodbath talk. She's getting into there were good people on both sides talk, to which we all know that these statements were taken out of context and were complete lies. This is what she's doing right now. Now let's listen to Donald Trump actually answer to that question that they're referencing to right now.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Brett, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within, that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you,
that was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it. And this is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
Isn't it funny listening to her say that he can't handle criticism, yet she's the one who's yelling and elevating her voice while trying to articulate to us once again how Donald Trump is apparently going to be some dictator who now, this is a new one, I haven't heard this one yet, now he wants to turn the American army, the U.S. Army, on the citizen population if they politically disagree with him. That weaponizing the justice system talk. You know, the same thing that we watch Harris and Biden do over and over again, not just to Donald Trump, but to RFK Jr. as well. You know how, like, when Mark Zuckerberg came out and admitted to the fact that the Biden administration pressured him and pushed him into labeling people's posts on Facebook as misinformation, even though it wasn't misinformation. It's so funny and it's so interesting how, once again, in closing, everything that they claim Donald Trump is going to do if he gets in office, they are currently doing now. Literally everything that they speak on his name is projection, because that is what they are doing. And you keep that in mind the closer we get to November 5th. With all that being said, that does it for today's news. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. Please hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel. Share this video out on your social media platforms. And also don't forget to follow me on Telegram and Rumble. It is extremely important that you do that. Please follow me on Telegram and Rumble at TD Media Group. The link to my Telegram and Rumble will be in the description box below, as well as pinned in the comment section as well. Thank you all for your time. Until the next video, peace and have a great afternoon.